We're live. We're live.
Sorry, I was looking for you.
Good evening. Welcome everyone to our regularly scheduled Government Operations Committee meeting for today, Monday, April 1st, 2024. And at the table, we have Councillors Leonard, Trimble, Dean, Schaefer, Fournier, and Fish, and myself, Councillor Yaqub Aga. We also have Courtney O'Donnell, who is Assistant City Manager. We have a few items on the agenda today. I think it's a long one, but I'm excited. So with the first item, we have Regional Climate Action Plan presentation.
Yes.
And who is gonna?
Yes, we
present to us
have
tonight?
Maddie Jensen, planner with the Bangor Area Comprehensive Transportation System, commonly referred to as BACS. BACS acted as the project manager for this Regional Climate Action Plan. So Maddie is going to give an overview of that. We also have Anya Collette, our city planner, who has been heavily involved in this process from the Bangor perspective as well. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick for Maddie's presentation. And if you, actually, I think if I give you this, you can just have for awesome, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me back. I think this is my third time stopping by the GovOps committee to give you an update on this process, and this is our final update. So hopefully not the last you'll hear from me with other things going on. Just a very broad overview of the project for those who are new. Penobscot Climate Action is a regional planning effort that was created in partnership with the city, Town of Orono, BACS, and University of Maine to outline what sorts of climate changes we can expect locally and to give us a baseline assessment of our greenhouse gas emissions, which will help us figure out who and what is at risk locally. And we also were hoping to develop specific strategies that will help us reduce those emissions and make our community and infrastructure more resilient in the face of a change. So here's another kind of overview of the deliverables for the entire project. We are now concluding phase 2 of the project and the entire thing in general. You can find all the deliverables on the project website at penobscotclimateaction.org. Phase of kind of overview of phase 2 deliverables. We have the executive summary, which as the name implies is kind of an overview of the entire project. And then we have kind of a suite of recommendations that we're proposing. I think there's about 41 of them. 10 of those recommendations were given specific toolkits, which give very specific details and support for how to implement those strategies, hopefully quickly and as easily as possible. Those aren't necessarily the most important. There's kind of a mix within the Appendix A additional strategies, but they were identified as being high priority and high impact by our community members and by municipal staff. Also, Appendix B gives an overview of the community process that we engaged. It was really, really important that this plan was community informed and that decisions were guided by our community. And so if you want more details on what we did, that's a great place to look. And then finally, Appendix C is our community energy and emissions model, which I'll go into a little bit more detail later. But if you want to see the assumptions and some of the nitty gritty methodology for that, that would be where you check that out. Now I'm going to go into the 10 toolkits, give you a little bit more detail on those. Please feel free to stop me at any point. I'm going to kind of fly through them quickly because there's a lot of content there. So just feel free to stop me. And then Anya is going to hop in with any kind of tidbits for the city specifically. So within our 10 toolkits, we had 5 kind of overarching topic areas. We had housing and buildings, transportation, community resilience, local economies and livelihoods, and the environment. And in each of these 10 toolkits, again, we really wanted to make it as easy as possible for municipalities to implement these. And so we outlined specific steps for implementation, resources like precedent from other areas, examples that we can use to get started, potential funding sources and grants that might be helpful in getting things moving, as well as key partners that the city or others might want to consider working with that would be really important for engaging in the work. So, toolkit number 1 and 2 is that housing and building, focused toolkits. These are gonna be really, really important because 60% of our region's emissions are attributed to energy use from buildings. And so if we want to be focusing on, energy reductions and emissions reductions, these are gonna be some of the most important ones. Kind of a broad strokes overview of these two toolkits is focusing on what sorts of zoning levers or incentive levers that the city can pursue that would make our homes and buildings more resilient to flooding, which we expect to experience more frequently in the future climate projections, as well as what we can do to make our buildings and homes more energy efficient, which that's really where the emissions reductions come from. But also making our homes more energy efficient is really important for community resilience more generally. So really kind of some big hitters here in number 1 and 2.
And from a zoning standpoint, I just want to chime in on that. Some of the things we would be looking at would be looking at how our zoning might discourage building in the floodplain to kind of take away that threat. There's also ways that you can both decrease emissions from a building as well as increase resilience. Like, for example, green roofs are a way for buildings to moderate their temperature, which both increases that resilience and can lower the emissions from heating and cooling. And we would also be looking at ways that zoning can maybe help decrease the amount of carbon in the materials of the building. And then a lot of the concepts in here also align with low impact development, which we have to eventually adopt an ordinance for that anyway, because we're an MS4 community and DEP is going to require that. It's going through the process right now. But the other thing I was going to mention too is that a lot of these concepts align with what's in our comprehensive plan, which will be starting on the implementation of that soon. So we're going to be hopefully implementing a lot of these concepts soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Anya. So toolkit number 3, 4, and 5 is our transportation kind of section. Another, really big chunk of our emissions, 30%, is attributed to energy use from transportation. And so we really heard consistently, and BACS hears as a transportation planning organization, that folks in the region really want alternatives to personal vehicles. They want more options for transit. They want more walkability, more bikeability. And so these are focused on what we can do to promote those alternative modes without, the transportation is a pretty energy and financially intensive sector. And so we really wanted to focus on what we can do that's realistic, that would have an impact that builds on, the current capacity we have without expanding, before we're ready. And so, particularly for public transit, we hear every day that folks want expanded transit, but, just last year we had driver shortages that caused us to have to decrease service. And so we really want to be mindful that we're not, blanket saying, yes, let's expand transit without really having a strong foundation that we can build on in the future. And so this is more focused on what we can do day to day to be more efficient with our resources.
Yeah, and as far as the walkable neighborhoods piece of it, so zoning really comes into that as far as creating more mixed use and dense neighborhoods, because when you have a diversity of uses in a place and you have more density, it means people don't have to walk as far to get places. So it really adds to that complete neighborhoods, walkable neighborhoods concept. And then the other thing, like one concept that can be encouraged through zoning is encouraging or in certain cases requiring certain types of development to be located close to transit routes. And that can really increase our ridership in the transit system as well. And then beyond zoning, we can look at things like adopting a complete streets policy that would come into effect whenever we're doing major road maintenance. And then also, we're already investing in bike and pedestrian infrastructure, but just continuing to do that more will help as well.
I have a question, please. So we talked before, maybe a year ago, about purchasing electrical buses if we can, and we know the city received just new buses, so it was not in the plan. Can we have this in the strategic planning, maybe like talking about a few years from now?
I have an update related to that under assistant city manager.
Thank you.
We're all set.
All right, toolkit number 6, our land management toolkit, is really focused on, as the name implies, what practices the city on the land that it owns, as well as on private land that we can do to better manage our resources, both in terms of like ecosystem services, but also pretty largely in terms of carbon sequestration. So we think about reducing emissions in a lot of these strategies, but our undisturbed forests are already sequestering about a third of the emissions that are attributed to this region. But a lot of those forests aren't formally protected. And so thinking about how we can protect those resources formally or expand them is another way to kind of come at this greenhouse gas emissions problem. So this is some specific recommendations around that.
Yeah, and some of the things that we can do, as far as private land goes, especially with zoning, is to look at, important habitat that we have in the city and align, our rules around preserving open space when subdivisions come along, align it with that important habitat and make sure that we have connected habitat. And also looking at maybe encouraging cluster subdivisions in some of the more rural parts of the city. And a lot of those concepts, again, align with the comprehensive plan. And so when we get into that implementation phase, we're going to be looking at this pretty strongly. And then just wanted to put a plug in for a case study in Maine. It's not zoning related, but South Portland has this program called 100 Resilient Yards, where they, I think it's like a competition, I'm not really sure, but they are encouraging and educating people about how to convert their yard to different types of habitat that it makes their yards more resilient, whether that's rain gardens or pollinator gardens or things like that. And it's really popular. So I just thought that was pretty cool.
All right, toolkit number 8, or number 7 and number 8 is our local economies and livelihoods focused toolkits. These are going to be really important for the city to look at partnerships. Of course, the city can't do everything on its own, and these two and the next two in particular are going to really require partnerships outside of the municipal context. And so, the first one being developing a sustainable business resource. We've been hearing a lot from local businesses that they are interested in being more sustainable, but there's so much information out there and it can be really difficult to kind of sift through that. And so this is one way that we can get them working on this, as well as our own municipal efforts. And then the Strengthening Green Trades Pipeline. There's a lot of kind of green industry that's becoming more popular across the country, as we need to start addressing these other issues that we already talked about. Specifically, like the building retrofit is going to require us to have energy audits, perhaps, install heat pumps, and we need really skilled tradesmen to do that work. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting that industry before we start, creating incentives that rely on that. So be kind of a partnership with, the local schools, as well as other like local business organizations. Anything to add, Anya?
I don't have.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure. All right, last two toolkits focused around community resilience. Most of the other ones obviously are around reducing emissions and kind of addressing the more tangible effects of climate change. But obviously, it's really important that our community has the resources to prepare for, withstand, and recover from these climate hazards that we expect to experience more and more frequently. And so these toolkits are in an effort to support the community, build off of the organizations that are already doing a lot of really good work in these areas. It's really around recommendations for the city and for those organizations to work better together so that we're being resourceful with our resources and in our limited capacity in these areas. Okay. On to our community energy and emissions modeling that I mentioned earlier. So in phase 1, we created a baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which shows, where our emissions are coming from, what sort of quantity is associated with this region. And now we wanted to, in phase 2, look at, okay, we have this baseline assessment and we have all of these strategies that reduce emissions, but what's the association between those? And so you can see here on the kind of chart, it's a little bit small. There's 2 lines that go across it that show the emissions reductions goals that the state and the city has actually already kind of passed. And so it's a 45% reduction by 2030 and an 80% reduction in emissions by 2050. And then you can see those colored kind of wedges show what each strategy that's either in this plan that were recommended, as well as some major state and federal incentives that are coming out, and what the kind of the emissions reduction association with those is. If you can see what each of those wedges is, it's largely transportation and building efficiency that really make the biggest impact in terms of our emissions. You can also see that the model projects that we will have about a 73% decrease in emissions by 2050, which is just a little bit shy of our 80% goal. Important to consider that this is not, the end all, it's not that we can't reach these goals. It's just something that we need to keep in mind. We might need to consider pursuing these actions a little bit more rapidly or aggressively, or we might also be hoping to hear from, more incentives coming from the state and the federal government as we're expecting. But just important to keep in mind as we're thinking about, what strategies have what impact, how quickly we want to be pursuing these. Are there any questions? I know that's kind of a lot. Okay. And then here's just a couple kind of broad strokes recommendations that we're making to all of the municipalities in the region that we're going to come visit. First, we identify a local game plan. Anya's already kind of explained what your local game plan is. You just completed the comprehensive plan, which would be really helpful to integrate these recommendations into. Adopt a resolution. You guys are ahead of the pack, the only one in the region who's already adopted a resolution supporting climate action. So that's really great. And then finally, we have assigned a staff person to the Climate Action Committee that BACS is proposing to form as a resource to all the towns in the region, as well as the major stakeholders who are going to be necessary to move all of these actions forward. We're really hoping that it will continue this work, as all of the community members who participated have been calling us to do, is to keep this work moving. And so we hope that the committee will be a place for folks to talk and share resources, perhaps pursue funding as a region. Capacity is limited, and we want to acknowledge that we're better together and we can do more together. And so hopefully this committee will be a way to do that. Yes, and that's it. Just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for all of your support. Getting this project started, passing the resolution, continuing to support it through municipal staff who've been sharing their expertise throughout the process. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Councilor Trumbull.
I'm guessing to get to that 73% goal, which is what you want, you need to buy in from the whole region. So have you been meeting with municipalities that aren't on that initial group? Like, I know it was us and Orono and the university, but there were a number of communities that were in this part of the committee. Have we
Yes.
reached out to those communities?
Yes,
during this process?
they've been involved throughout the process, largely in more providing information and reviewing materials. But we've spoken to them, and we had a staff implementation workshop where a lot of the communities in the region attended, and there seemed to be pretty broad support for joining this sort of committee. And the model actually does include or assume support or implementation of these strategies throughout the region.
Right.
I would just add that actually that implementation workshop that Maddie mentioned I thought it was very well attended and had a much larger cross-section of representation from municipalities in our region than I might have expected. Because when we kicked this off, we really hoped to pull them on board. And it originally we were thinking it probably wasn't to the degree we wanted, but as Maddie mentioned, they stepped up in other ways. Wasn't always financial, but they shared information. They're very interested in this work. They just may not have the staff time or the resources to dedicate in a large way, which is where hopefully this regional committee will come into play in terms of sharing that burden, if you will, in terms of going after things as a region. So it's so nice to actually see this presentation come to fruition. It was one of the first things that actually Kathy Conlo had slapped on my desk when I first started. And so it's been a really long but rewarding process. And of course, the staff person going to be assigned to this committee is likely to be Anya and her staff, just because it makes so much sense with the comprehensive plan and carrying the work through as we continue to move forward now that this plan is completed.
Any more questions?
That's great.
Okay, I think, yeah, Councillor Fish.
Do we have any idea of the difference in construction for developers to implement these suggested changes? As to, you know, if we have to change codes and zoning and perhaps ordinances, what would be the cost difference? What would be some of the key strategic changes developers would have to meet? And what additional costs, if any, does that mean for the construction for the developers?
I don't have I might pass this off to you, but I think the goal is ultimately to provide resources to the developers. It's not just throwing it out there and we're expecting them to, get up to speed. But I'll probably hand it over to Anya, who's more, to that.
Yeah, some of these changes would be more like starting out as a pilot program to kind of get them acquainted with how rules might look, and then maybe eventually it could become a requirement. But for certain things, there's often a conception that more stringent building codes for energy efficiency, for example, might cost more, but in reality, they often don't actually cost more. We've seen this like with affordable housing projects across the country, really, when they have to go to extra links for energy efficiency and things, they're actually finding sometimes actually the cost can be even less than conventional building. And especially when you look at the operating cost as well, that's going to be lower over time. But even the upfront cost can be equivalent or even lower. So I think it's kind of a conception issue with certain aspects of these, of the plan. But of course, in other ways, there might obviously be things that do increase cost, and that's where we would look to kind of phase things in over time and not just.
So maybe start out with more incentives until
Right.
something is worked out.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
I think we need a motion since
Okay, no, I was gonna say I move it.
Okay,
I move approval.
we have a
Second.
motions and we have a motion and a second and
He's not on the committee, sorry.
Oh,
He's
that's
not-
right.
Yeah. I forgot to mention
Sorry.
Councillors Fish, Schaefer and Trimble, yeah, second, so item is approved. Thank you. Thanks.
Just real quick, I wanted to introduce Sarah Devlin. She is the executive director of BAX, and has also been instrumental in this work. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, we move to the second item on the agenda. Legal,
Yes, this is an item by City Solicitor Dave Sevchuk, who's joining us at the table now.
Hi again.
hello.
This item is a proposed change to the Board of Appeals ordinance. It's really just a housekeeping measure that will make operating at the board more efficient. What the change would be, it would give the chair of the board the discretion to grant a continuance if applied, if requested by the applicant. Our ordinance currently requires that a public hearing be held within 60 days of an application to the Board of Appeals. And by requesting the continuance and consenting to it, the applicant would be allowing for us to go beyond that 60-day period. But there are, since I've been here, there've been a number of occasions where an applicant has wanted and needed a continuance. Sometimes these Board of appeals are filed by people who are appealing a code enforcement officer, for example's enforcement decision, and they have a 30-day deadline in which to file the appeal. They don't really want to do the appeal, but they have to, in order to preserve it, they file the appeal within 30 days, and then they would like a continuance to try to work out the violation. And so far, since I've been here, and I think Councilor Dean, has happened maybe a few times when you were on the Board of Appeals. You have to commence, currently under our current ordinance, you have to commence the entire Board of Appeals. You have to have a quorum to grant the continuance, but the change would allow the chair to be able to do that without having to show up with the quorum just to grant the continuance. And again, this is something that's requested for by the applicant. And every time that applicants have requested and needed continuances since I've been here, and it's happened at least 3 or 4 times, the matter resolves and then it never ends up coming back for a hearing because it gets resolved because they have time to do so. So this is really, the only other little change would be, the ordinance says that there has to be 60 days, public hearing within 60 days of the application. Another housekeeping change, just receipt of the application and the required fee, which is how we do it now anyway. We don't start counting 60 days till they pay the application fee. And so that's also built into the proposed change. And I'd be glad to field any questions. It's sometimes difficult to get a quorum, and so to get a quorum for something that you don't really need to show up for is really kind of a waste of resources and effort.
I would move staff recommendation.
A second.
No questions, no comments, I think it's approved.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Third item on the agenda.
Yes, this is an order authorizing a tree donation for Bangor Beautiful. I have Public Works Director Aaron Hootery here to provide an overview.
Good evening again. So many of you may remember a donation last fall from Bangor Beautiful on Park Street and Center Street intersection. Bangor Beautiful is a tax exempt organization. They're dedicated to making our community a more beautiful place through public art, trees and gardens, and other beautification efforts. This is specifically about trees. So they want to donate 19 total trees. 17 of those trees would go at the intersection of Ohio, Hammond Street, and High Streets. And it's a significant number of trees, but I think it will make a nice impact. It really would be nice to once these start to get bigger and have all the canopy. I think that really can make a big difference. And it really kind of ties into our discussion earlier about climate change. We have a lot of neighborhoods in the city that have lost trees over time. They've not been replaced. So I think this is just great work. The other two trees, one will go on Norfolk, one will go in Old Cemetery Park. And the idea is, instead of having individual donations coming to you for approval, we'll funnel them all through Bangor Beautiful. So 19 total trees, a value of 4,315. I want to point out that my botanical budget for the forestry division is $8,000. This just added another 50% of that. It's an awesome donation. In my opinion, it's an awesome donation. And I hope that the Government Operations Committee can accept this donation.
Yes, I think it's awesome. I think especially, I do have a hard time picturing where they're gonna go because all I picture is, Dave's that's the wrong corner though. It's like the former lead bedders.
Yes.
And I do have a hard time picturing where they're gonna go, but is it gonna be like on the Esplanade?
So we are going to, yes, and I did include a map on the second page or the next page. They're a mixture. There's 6 at the entrance to High Street. Coming up the hill, there's 4 on the right. Bangor Beautiful made the effort to reach out to the owner of the property
Okay,
and got approval on that, even though it's technically the right of way. We have the right to plant there. Just wanted to make sure it was okay with the property. Ohio Street has some there on the Esplanades where we've lost trees. The big one in front of the corner store, there used to be an Esplanade there. We paved over it years ago. I have no idea why. It was many years ago. But in speaking with John, we have a couple different options. We're actually going to meet over there this week and remove some pavement, which is nice. Having an
that's
Esplanade.
awesome, yeah.
Yeah, instead of having this really wide sidewalk unnecessarily, adding that pavement back. And, I'd love to take credit for this kind of stuff, but Bangor Beautiful is really leading the way and had these ideas. So, I have to point out that Treasurer?
I'm sorry.
Treasurer Secretary of Bangor Beautiful is here, Greg Edwards. And if you had any more specific questions about that, I'm sure he could answer them, but staff certainly supports this.
I will move staff recommendation 100%. Bangor Beautiful does exactly what they say they're gonna do and making Bangor more beautiful at every turn. So it's very appreciated by me, at least.
I don't think I responded or reported back after the donation last fall, but very seamless. We went in and did a little bit of prep work. We scoped the sites with Bangor Beautiful, did the dig saves. They had volunteers there. I was very impressed with the whole operation, so no concerns saying that this would be a welcome addition.
Awesome.
Yeah, I want to thank Bangor Beautiful as well. Yeah, this is an amazing addition. We always need some greenery out there. And I know with more frequent storms, winter storms like we have been seeing, we're losing more trees, and I can see them, just broken. And so I feel like this is gonna be a really nice addition to those streets. Thank you so much.
And I would just add, I feel like a lot of the trees that we've lost, like I know my street, so many trees on my street have gone, I think they've just hit their end of life, and they would probably have fallen if they were in the woods too. It's just more exciting when it's on your car. But so making sure that we are replacing and not replacing them and getting them back is nice too. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and we need a
Second.
second. Thank you. So we have a motion and second. It's approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Okay. The next item. Home discipline.
Yes, I believe city manager is joining us.
Yeah,
He's
right now. Yes. And the reason I asked to add this to the agenda tonight, because we have had a lot of discussions about the unhoused population. It's good to remind the public of the steps the city has taken in the past year to address the problem and who we were able to help, who we were unable to help, and the barriers to services, shelters, and in the end, like my goal of this as well, like to put it on the agenda, is to see how can we proceed to adopt this plan? What does it take for us as a council to adopt this plan? Because I feel we have addressed a lot of points on this plan that was presented by Jonathan Sprague, who was in the council. And the staff, what I like about this is that the staff was able to come back and add their comments to it and keep adding comments and reviewing it. So I feel maybe we can get to a point where we can really adopt a version of this plan, like after all of those comments and additions to it. So let's start.
Okay,
It's a long one, so, yeah.
there. So the first item.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh,
Councilor Little.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
The first item was assure sufficient warming capacity center, daily and overnight. That did happen throughout the winter months.
Yeah, I guess questions
Yeah.
would go on. And the warming center, how do warming centers get designated?
So the warming centers, it's basically an individual or a group within the community that determines that they feel they can serve as a warming center. And most oftentimes it occurs in a church, because it is in essence an extension of what they do as an entity.
So, and you can go someplace and get a list of warming. I understand
Yeah.
the library is actually a warming center as well. Is that correct?
So they did get on that list.
Yeah.
I pointed out that they were on the list and they said, I didn't mean to be on the list.
Okay. I
So,
didn't think they
now.
didn't mean to be on the list.
so the daytime warming sites were, the Bangor Area Homeless Shelter, the well up on, Central Street. The nighttime, that operated was obviously Bangor Area Homeless Shelter, the Brick Church, as well as the Mansion Church. The Brick Church, you may remember, the city actually provided a significant amount of community development block grant money, so that the building is sprinkled, so they can actually set up beds and cots and things like that. The others don't
Put
operate that
showers
way.
in too, right?
Yep, they,
Laundry facilities and showers.
don't,
At
I
the
think,
church we did, yeah.
yeah, I don't know that they're year round.
Oh, I don't know about that
I think,
either.
so I know the well put in, showers and washers and dryers. We continue, with a small but mighty group of outreach to continue to do and replicate the same work, behind Hope House, for example, that we did along Valley Avenue. Alternate options for individuals with encampments, that's becoming a bit more difficult. There are virtually no housing vouchers available from the state Shelter Plus Care program anymore. The city typically has 1 to 3 a month that may become available. These are assigned through coordinated entry, which is overseen and administered by the Maine State Housing Authority. And then on February 2nd, the state of Maine implemented a waitlist protocol for assigning Bridging Rental Assistance Program, or BRAP, vouchers to individuals who are homeless. Homeless individuals were identified as a priority 3 by the state. And once they had fully subscribed for their priority 1s and priority 2s, they then closed it to priority 3 or unhoused individuals.
I have a question, please, just to go back to the second point about how the city of Bangor and Portland have been invited to participate in the broader statewide work.
Yeah.
So where are we now, like, in this work?
So I sit in on a call
Mhm.
that now happens once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Not every week. as it
Yeah,
used to be.
no.
Okay.
And what they are talking about is, as they continue the work, they really are focused a lot on the work that they're trying to do in Portland, but I do pick up
Mhm.
pieces when we're talking about changes in state programs. Yep.
Okay.
We did a cleanup and removal of debris last week at the encampment behind the Hope House, where that was 4 roll-off dumpsters was removed. I know the council chairs chatted about the city of Portland's ban on homeless encampments on public property. I did have a meeting earlier today with the city manager, and I'm gonna say, interestingly enough,
Mhm.
didn't ask, she did say they are beginning to see tents pop back up again. It's
Mm.
still, it's still ongoing, as one might expect.
Mhm.
So we continue, the practice of posting areas where individuals have left, indicating the area is closed. And the signage always provides contact information for homeless service providers. We continue the approach behind Hope House, fewer agencies and resources participating, but those that are working within the area are making progress. We have a really good idea of the individuals that are there. We probably have 6 or 8 that we've actually been able to get housing vouchers for, not just waitlisted vouchers. We have housed a few individuals as well, and we have a couple of more this week that we are trying to finalize the leases on. So we continue to do that work behind Hope House.
And my question is, because I remember you
Yep.
mentioned some organizations stopped participating, maybe there were some safety issues back in, no, it was.
No, so when HUD was here, virtually, there were representatives from virtually every agency sitting and coming to meetings. And
So they felt it was well organized,
Right,
well
and-
supervised, and there's this
They
federal
wanted to
entity that is, yeah.
they wanted to participate. So the 2 agencies that, in addition to the city, that did the most work at the end were likely PCHC and CHCS.
Mhm.
PCHC obviously has a shelter to run. They don't have outreach.
Mhm.
But we have, brought some of those together. So PCHC does have some outreach.
Mhm.
So they are now joining the CHCS and the city folks who go out every day. They're coming on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So we are getting, and they continue to have 1 meeting a week with the whole group. And both PCH and CHCS are participating in that, so that we can talk through every individual resident.
Mhm.
What do you know about I've done this, I've done that, so that we have a better tracking.
How can the city take more leadership and reaching out to those organizations who pulled out from the work? How can we put more effort into bringing them to the table with the new hire of the?
That would be my hope.
So.
Not the housing, the homelessness.
The home. so
We
the
still haven't hired that one. That's
Yeah.
that's part of the problem.
But we had few applications. It came down to 2 of them, right?
So
Like-
we've had a couple of interviews, so we haven't heard back.
You haven't heard back?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel this might help bring those organizations back to work. So the load is not just on our staff and just a couple more organizations.
Most of those organizations already have a mission that they're fulfilling. This work is in addition to that work.
Mhm.
That's not true in all cases. Many organizations do have outreach, but they don't necessarily focus on that one area, and we're focused wholly on that encampment, not wholly, but every day, there's presence in that encampment.
And we talked earlier how in other meetings that we had about how we want to focus on individuals who are readier to be housed, not those who have been unhoused for a long period of time, like chronically unhoused, and it would be harder to house them. And so we want those who, we are gonna help. We want them to succeed, those who have not been chronically unhoused, so we have more positive outcome. That was, I
Well-
think, something we discussed here on the council.
Well, if you're going, anything I say, it's not meant to be general. But it's gonna sound general, and I don't mean it to be, but many of the individuals who, for example, are in the encampment behind the Hope House have been long-term chronically unhoused, and they're gonna be difficult. So our emphasis has been on working through the larger encampments and trying to find a resolution for them. So, not that other people's needs in the community who are unhoused or go unmet, but that's been our primary focus is to bring to close in some positive way encampments, the larger encampments. Don't get me wrong, we have smaller encampments around the city. We know where they are and we
Yeah.
know who's there.
Mhm.
And they're also being reached out to by outreach. So they are not,
Left.
they're not left to their own devices or anything like that, but we have a concerted effort on the larger encampment.
And you talk about evaluate results and it's upcoming or that was a part of the original plan.
That was part of the original. My ads are the bolds with the underline. So I think there is, we did the 6-month evaluation on those that we housed through Valley Avenue. Will be coming up on a year here in about a month or so ago. So we can obviously look at that.
So
But
do we have an idea where they are and if they're still
some
housed?
have maintained housing, some have not.
Okay. Yep, it's good to have some numbers so
Yep.
that we know where we are.
Short-term diversion strategies. We continue to provide diversion options, both general assistance and supporting reunification efforts. We had an outreach worker with another agency who approached me last week and said, I think they were also in the warming centers at night, trying to make sure that we were capturing and connecting with everybody. She'd come across 6 individuals who wanted to return to family. So we bought 6 bus tickets last week. And going back to known acquaintances or family members who were, some of whom were crying, they were so happy to have their person back. We've got a couple more that are going that have indicated a desire to go this week.
This state of Maine or from out of the state of Maine?
Philadelphia, Erie, Pennsylvania, Dallas, Texas, Riverside, California, Syracuse, New York. The two later this week are going back to Georgia.
Why are they coming?
So when I talk to the outreach, I don't try to get too much into it, but what the outreach workers share with me is they all have a different story as to how or why they got here. One individual shared, they just kept coming north on a bus until no one arrested them for being homeless. Another individual ended up, I believe it was part of a domestic partnership. And followed an individual that relationship had actually become violent. While their aggressor was incarcerated, that was at the moment that they chose it was safe for them to leave. And we helped facilitate that.
So when you say no one arrested them for being homeless, so
Mhm.
what does that mean? Did they do something like what?
No, I think in other states, they had been traveling from state to state, and when they got to places, they would find that communities would arrest them for being homeless. So they would get back on a bus
Mhm. Yeah,
and keep going.
yeah, I talked to this and I told Debbie about this guy, how did you end up here? And he said, I don't know, he was in somewhere in the west and then he came to Boston and then he took a bus to Portland and he ended up and I don't think he's gonna stop in Bangor for long. I feel just some people truly just, they're homeless. They go wherever, buses go. So if we have a bus up north, I think they're gonna take that bus up north. Truly, I mean, just those students anyway, yeah, so.
You know, bus question, I just keep coming in with people leaving, and I don't know if it's public health department policy or where the policy came from.
Yep.
But I understand our policy has been, if somebody wants to go to one of those cities you named off.
Right.
And they don't have a connection at the other end, we wouldn't buy them a bus ticket. I don't understand that policy. I'm like, why don't we just, if somebody wants to leave and they'll take a bus ticket and leave, I'm okay buying a bus ticket.
And I think what we tried to do was to be thoughtful that,
But there's resources every place.
but people do that to us,
Yeah.
you know, is it?
Well, no, I'm not doing it. I mean, people do, what people do to us is they put something in a bus and send them to someplace where somebody has asked to come. I mean, these are people asking to go someplace. I'm not saying just get a bus and put somebody on.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
mean,
saying
if somebody
wants to
has a
go
reason and a, no,
place,
that's a
you know.
good point. I can talk to public health. Our new public health director
Yeah,
started today.
That's all. No,
And it
I'm
was
not saying to
really-
get a bus and send somebody. I'm
It
saying
was
if somebody
really a
says, I wanna go
mechanism
to
to say,
Akron,
to make-
send it to Akron.
To make sure
That's
we're
all.
not sending somebody back into a
Right,
worse
yeah.
situation. Yep. I think I see a hand.
Yes, Councilor Leonard.
I just had a request if other councils were open to this as well. I really enjoyed the way, the airport will sometimes bring us some data that we can actually like see what has gone on. I think it's every quarter that they give us some sort of a data there. There's a lot of information here that Councilor Sprague, wrote up that I think can be tracked data that I personally would actually like to see, some sort of update regarding, individuals or people housed. And I'm more than willing to have a discussion as to what this report would be, but I think having a consistent reporting process that's delivered to counselors will give us all a really good idea as to what is happening on the ground, able to see like what are some seasonal issues. Because for example, I think in the last couple of months, we've had an uptick in people coming to the area during the summer. I'm just gonna expect that's going to happen again this summer as well. And I think what would be really helpful is if we had some sort of consistent tracking process at the end of the day. And I'd be open to having a discussion regarding what is that report that we would like to see, but if we want to do that.
Yeah, sure, thanks. Yes, Councilor.
I mean, I had asked for something similar when we had the new housing homelessness person start a long time ago, and we never got anything. Even if it was just, hey, this week we counted, you know, we know that we housed 10 people, we put 4 on a bus, and 2 seem to have disappeared from the camps, or just, you know, and like airport data is like a great example. We don't need to have names, circumstances, diagnoses, but just what are our numbers doing? And it, you know, the Bangor Area Homeless Shelter often will, and I maybe even the city of Bangor, but we'll post, hey, we have someone.
Yes.
And those wins are so nice to see,
Yes.
and I feel like there's probably more out there that we don't see, so even if it was just, hey, 4 people were housed, instead of just this constant feeling of,
We're not getting anywhere.
we're just treading water
Yep.
and drowning.
Yeah, I think it helps us know what
Mhm.
has been done, what we call, you know, success, and what we lack. So like, what do we need to do more? So I feel this is why maybe,
Yeah.
and I totally agree with the suggestion, Councilor Leonard and Councilor Schaefer. Yeah, to keep track of the activities that the
Mhm.
city staff is doing.
You want just do you want just cities? I mean, that's different. So in listening to folks, to me, it's accumulation of data from all of the providers.
Well, isn't that what I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
Isn't that one of the things that like HUD was supposed to do, is provide these sort of dashboards and provide, everyone's got the iPads and the lists, and that the lists are synced up?
But that's just for the encampment. That's
Okay.
not citywide.
All right,
So it's just the one encampment.
okay.
It was, we worked on that as it related to Valley Avenue. It was not.
And then what was the, wasn't Built for Zero working on a thing where there was like
Yeah, I did mention in here later that CHCS is probably the one to come back because they actually have the landlord liaison program. And you can chat and we can have them update you on the Built for Zero.
and when I asked for, in asking for this, I would not want it to be that all of a sudden our outreach teams and the social service
Right.
agencies and our own city agencies are spending all their time in front of Excel. But
Right.
I feel like And I honestly feel like it might be good for the outreach workers to look back and be like, hey, I got one person housed. I know that it's sometimes nice for me in my professional life to be able
Yeah.
to stop and feel like, instead of looking at the mountain ahead of me, to look behind me and say, hey, I actually did okay on these things.
Correct.
So, you know,
Yep.
a priority, but not, absolutely not the overarching priority is take care of
So
them. unhoused.
CHCS, Courtney
Mm-hmm.
will see if they can
Schedule.
come in. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where we
Yeah.
can pause and we can reevaluate what we have done. And
Maybe
what-
we'll have a homelessness position.
I mean,
Bill.
I was hoping this is, when you said we have two applicants, and I thought maybe we would
Yeah,
have one.
not quite. All
Yeah.
right, we're working at it. So, I don't know if you want me to keep going through, but I mean, we have done a lot. Obviously, we talked about, the, police, policy last week. The landlord liaison program that is under, the direction of, community health and counseling. They have revamped the program, so again, why I think it will be helpful if they come into GovOps.
Mhm.
Voucher programs, obviously, as I shared, there are very few housing vouchers at this point.
Mhm.
And Robin's been sharing with you that she's in the midst of revamping her planning process for the coming year, as well as the 5-year plan as it relates to community development block grant funds. We did, get an update from the Maine Recovery Council as it relates to the opioid funding. They have made some initial investments, and they are working to develop an overall approach, strategy, and framework to allocate or create an application process for the balance of the funds. Support organizations providing housing and treatment. We do that. We do it through general assistance. We do it through our ARPA funds and our CDBG funds. We do have the contract with HEAL for the syringe pickup. I think that's been well received by our community. And Needlepoint will focus outreach efforts within encampments and not in our public spaces. Our new community services manager will begin in a couple of weeks. So that position has been vacant for some time, so that's getting refilled.
So the community services manager,
Yeah.
what are the, let's say, the duties or the tasks?
So they oversee general assistance, they oversee outreach,
Uh-huh.
they serve as the point of contact for the shelter plus care specialist. And they provide general, sort of what I'm gonna call administrative support to the public health director. Yeah. But they also, lots of times, have relationships with, we all have relationships with every other agency because none of us can do it alone. Clarify the need for shelter beds. Central to any clarification on shelter beds is ensuring that there's adequate state funding of shelters. So I'm hopeful that we'll see some movement out of the legislature this session. So the steering committee for the Dorothea Dix, the purpose of that committee was to focus on the reuse of the facilities for state programs and to identify plans to address the existing vacant structures. As the current unused structures cannot be salvaged, there is an opportunity for the structures and there's no opportunity to fulfill for a future beneficial public use. Therefore, the committee met, I think, once or twice and deemed its work complete. I'm hoping that the Hart Community Center, which opened today, will offer services to individuals who are unhoused, struggle with unstable housing, use substances, struggling with some mental health diagnosis, or need other resources, that individuals will be able to make connections to the services they need there. It is open 7 days a week, 8:30 to 5. Address the use of Bangor Public Library for homeless individuals seeking daytime shelter. Again, I believe and I'm hopeful that the Hart Community Center is that option to redirect individuals to become more resource adjacent, as I like to call it nowadays.
And this is a daytime shelter.
Yeah, it's open from 8:30 to 5 every day, Monday through 7 days a week. Develop with the downtown partnership a more complete plan for addressing hospitality and cleanliness and security. Again, I think part of that solution is the Hart Community Center. The city has committed significant resources to enhance the downtown. We've added additional money for landscaping. We have a public works employee. Last year, we added the park ranger program. I hope folks heard, the police chief has shared that once we get staffing back to a certain level, obviously, returning a downtown walk would be reestablished. And the downtown partnership, chatted with the BNED committee, about the third-party service provider here in the month of March. Additional downtown bathrooms. We are currently in our public, forum, portion of the work. So we've done 2 public forums already. We have our 3rd one tomorrow night. Finance committee has already approved the contract for the construction of the units. And we will begin to build them, even though we have not finalized a location, because we don't ever want to be, we're not going to hold up the building of them for that. So later this month, because now I can say that because it's April, we'll be coming back with some conversations about the placement of public restrooms. We continue to keep updating the information on our website, on the homeless response section, and we are actually just kicking off the redesign process for our entire website. City councils has continued to support legislation to ensure greater accountability by the state. Staff members reach out to other entities when we become aware of individuals in our community who may have gotten here in a different way. So we continue to have those conversations. The homelessness response manager has been posted and created. It's been advertised for over 4 months. These positions sometimes take time to fill with the right person, but we're hopeful. We continue to push that priority. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, the fact that the city council chose housing as its priority was really helpful. To date, we have, you all have created regulations and allowances for co-living dormitories, reduced off-street parking minimums, approved the rezoning of the 10+ acre parcel of city-owned property for residential purposes. You have further supported the use of ARPA funding for infrastructure improvements on the Grandview property that will allow us to determine the development parameters. And you met our housing specialist who started last week. So for the first time in the 15 months that Anne has held the position of Community and Economic Development Director, she is fully staffed for the first time in 15 months.
Wow.
And 3 of those staff just came on in the last 2 weeks. So that's a big win. And I think on the back side, I think that was sort of the ends of my updates. And I would really like to think that I think when Councilor Sprague put this forward, so I will always remember the phrasing he uses. His plans are a flexible framework of so you remember that as well. And I think this needs to remain a flexible framework that we continue to add and update and not, it has to be able to be adaptable.
Yeah.
And to your point, I'm hoping is if we can get a response manager in, that we start building those relationships and pulling out that data that I think will be crucial for you all.
Yeah, and we'll comment on this. Just, I'm gonna
Yeah.
take Councillor Fournier's comment. Yes, please.
Question, you opened up the door on Maine Recovery Council and what
Yeah.
they're doing. What are we doing with our opioid settlement?
So some of it is we had kind of back along, I think we had talked about, we'd like to be able to see what the Maine Recovery Council does.
Okay.
To see if we can augment their efforts locally, or maybe there's a gap that they're not meeting in our community that we have a need for. We have about 200 to 200, and I think it's right around, when you average all the years out at this point, I think we're around 200 or 210,000 a year for 16 or 17
Right.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just thought that
Yeah.
should be.
yes, thank you.
Are we paying the needle thing with
Yes.
ARPA money or is
No.
that money?
We're using the opioid settlement
Okay,
money
yeah.
for the HEAL contract for the syringe
And that's
pickup.
about
30,000 a year, yeah.
So my comment on this, how can we always go back to this? When we say adopt it, at the same time, we are flexible to work on it, to add to it, to change things as they come, as they happen. But to always come back to this, that we have a plan, and I think it's truly very thorough. It's, I mean, with every point, I mean, I can't imagine any more thorough plan than this one, especially that staff, you had a look at this and you edited, you added. So I don't see why can't we adopt a plan? And when we have data added to this, so we can always come back to this, always revisit this, where are we now at this point? What were we able to achieve? And what else can we do? That's where I am right now. I feel like it's really, that we have a very valuable document. That's how I see it. And I don't know, how can we move forward and adopt this? What is the process? And
Well, I mean, I would say if you want to remain flexible is what we could do. And to Counselor Leonard's point and to Counselor Schaefer's point, is we could make sure that we're doing a quarterly update.
okay,
And we can include the action steps taken and any additions or subtractions. And I'm gonna be very honest, it's unlikely I'm gonna make any additions until we have a homelessness response. I can just tell you what the folks are still doing.
yeah. Yes, Councilor Schaefer.
I mean, like, we kind of took what I was gonna say, and that I would wanna have the homelessness expert go over this and maybe use this as a seed to create a city-based plan and then have them bring it to the council, because there's a lot of information here. And it would be good to make sure that we also have the experts in the social services and all of that also adding their voice to it.
Councilor Trumbull?
No, I like that idea, the regular updates, and there's a lot involved, yeah. Oh, thanks for the work, one thing. But the thing I would like to see before waiting too long is some specific areas looked at. And 3 weeks ago, we listened to people from the University of Maine Bangor campus. I mean, it's like you take care of one problem, something else will pop up. But I just think we really need to address the encampment that's next to that location. I know we've got it's on the list, we cleaned it up. I'd like to see what's the plan to clear, I think that encampment has to be cleared out. And I don't know, and we need a plan where obviously there's gonna be some type of encampment in the city someplace. I'm not saying what it should be, but that just doesn't seem like it's the appropriate place next to the university out there, so I don't have any answers. But I think we need a discussion about how we're gonna continue in that spot.
Yeah, and I think, cleaning that up, clearing it out, it means we are left with that population. Where are they gonna go? Just to be realistic, I mean.
That's why I said we gotta.
Yeah, because I was
figure it
there
out.
and, I attended the forum and yes, I mean, the concerns, are legitimate and are real. At the same time, even those who spoke, we're talking about how to address the topic with compassion,
Right.
everyone. So I appreciated how they proceeded there. But again, I mean, to have a conversation, what is the alternative? Because they will pop up somewhere else,
Mhm.
yeah. Yes, Councilor Leonard.
Yeah, to that point, I think it's important to make sure that compassion is part of our mission statement overall. I mean, of course, no one wants an encampment here in Bangor. Fact of the matter is, though, when you do clear an encampment out, those people are going to go somewhere. And the last thing we want to do is have individuals that are confused going into people's neighborhoods that would have never interacted with that individual in the first place. And so before we do any sort of plan, I would want to make sure before we clear out any encampment is we have a place where these individuals who need services can go. And that this isn't just a get out of here and then good luck, Joe or Jane. We have to be very compassionate regarding these individuals and making sure that we help transfer them back into the economy, back into society. And I'm gonna be pretty pretty contentious regarding just a straight up erasure of the encampment.
That's not what
I didn't think.
I
it
said
was.
with a plan for someplace.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no,
But that's all.
no.
It's sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, but that's why I said we need a plan.
Just curious if there's any update on Pine Tree Inn.
So there is. So I finally got an update. So everything is ready to move forward. There are some. The Pine Tree Inn, still had individuals on site. So they are working through, they have worked to try to relocate and find alternate housing, none of which has been accepted at this point. So they are in the eviction process. So once the structure itself is completely empty, they can actually get the insurance certificate they need to start the renovation work. It is a 3 to 4 month timeline once they start that. And I do, since you all opened it up and you actually opened it up more, you know, I do have sort of a loose outline to address and work through the encampment behind Hope House. And I have talked to the outreach workers to see if they felt good about this plan. And my suggestion, and we could certainly come back and have this discussion at a different time, but my suggestion is we don't allow new individuals to enter the encampment. So that if you are showing up today, we're gonna work and say, no, you can't be here, and allow us to work through the individuals that are on site. And the outreach will continue to work with them, get them signed up for housing. My hope is during that timeline, we'll have units come online. It will be good options for some of those folks. It will not be a good option for everybody. But it is a viable option for a number of individuals on site so that we have 2 right now who are, in the final application process for their permanent housing. So people are housed out of there on a regular enough basis. It's just difficult without vouchers. But with the Pine Tree Inn coming on, I think we have some opportunities for some folks to be redirected there. So what I'd like to suggest is we don't allow new entrants into that encampment. And that the outreach team continue to do its work as Ted showed us and Ted taught us in that area. And we look at hopefully setting a final closure date of somewhere, where are we now? You know, depending on when some of these housing units come on, you know, it's like September 30th, it's gonna be, we're all done. We're gonna close the encampment. We did clear up quite a bit of the areas. We will post those as not being open. And again, do what we did. Valley Avenue, we could just post everything when we were done, and we've just been posting sections as we work through the encampment behind Hope House.
Yeah, discuss
Council,
it
you
first,
mentioned
yeah.
somebody that says follow up after that.
Yes.
This document is, I read it, I took notes, and it's very informative, and I appreciate the updates. But I think also there's some other, things going on within our community that are contributing to the problem. So I think along with data and facts and information, it might be helpful to know, what are the causes of it? I mean, I know it's homelessness, but I also think relocation is part of it. And I think the housing and affordability, inaffordability of the housing is part of it. But I really think the biggest problem is a drug problem, an opioid problem, substance abuse problem, and relocation. I think that a lot of them are coming here by choice of relocating here. And I think a lot of them, it's strongly suggested they come here. So it would be nice to know with the people we have, what are the causes? How are they getting here and why are they getting here? And how many of them are our community? I say our community, I know we're a bigger city. We have more responsibilities to some of our smaller communities around us. But I also think there's some communities around us that could be more cooperative and collaborative with us. And so if we could kind of have an outline that also say, these seem to be contributing key factors besides just housing, because housing is a small part of it. And where are the people, where are they coming from? Why are they here? How many are refusing to be housed? I know some people that were involved in the Portland encampment, and they were actually quite surprised at how successful it went. And that, yes, there's some camps coming up now, but it actually has gone a lot more positive than they expected.
Yeah.
And the people have been much more cooperative now that they know they're getting tougher. It's not, yeah, you can camp there. They're actually becoming much more cooperative about housing. That they're individually working more with service providers. And so they've kind of gotten the incentive, no, you can't go there, so maybe you do wanna participate in your own future. And the nonprofits we have, there's 33 to 50 nonprofits. And I don't know that they're all contributing on the positive side of this equation. Where's the overlap and what are they doing? What kind of accountability do they have to the city of exactly the activities they're doing? And when they bring the people in, are they dropping the ball? And then, you know, where the individuals that are left suddenly without the service or they're attracted here, you know, there's a lot of good being done in a lot of them, but some of them I think are competing for the same bucket of money, sort of say. And I don't know that there's a lot of incentive for them to work collaboratively and cooperatively. And so how can they work with the city and with each other? So we just have a better handle about what they're doing, what's going on under our roof, and how it could maybe run as a better, you know, engine. So I know there's a lot there, but I know I got 3 or 4 calls this week, and I know Susan, you did too. But there's a business community that had a tough week. And one large business community family is about ready to throw the towel in. So somehow we really have to figure this out.
And I will say that some of what you're saying is also reminiscent of Councilor Sprague, who would say, what I want is all of you nonprofits to collaborate and come together with a new solution or a newer approach.
Yeah,
And
I hope with this homelessness
Yeah.
position, like
Yeah.
when it happens.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And a lot of times, if you think about, so what I've noticed is most of the funding for services, support services, outreach services, housing services, all flow down from the federal government to the state of Maine. And then the federal government says, this is the program and how it's gonna operate. Or the state of Maine says, this is the program and this is how it's gonna operate. Which is why it was really important that I thought, you gotta at least let me hear you as your state agencies when you're talking, because I don't think the state agencies aren't actually doing the work. It's other organizations in our community. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the plan is kind of a big picture plan. I've got another little picture question. And I know he's a private individual, but it was very generous offer that Stan made. Is there any way we can work with him to?
Yeah,
Because he's
I'll
offered
follow
to
up
see
with
that
Stan.
every few weeks and keep
Yeah.
it looking good out there over
Yeah.
the summer, so I know he wants to be
I know he
helpful.
And
it's a
now
great
we've got-
offer.
And now, because we did the removal, that area, right adjacent to Cleveland Street would be set for, once we stop having snow.
Right, okay, July.
Don't say July. Don't say July. So that's what I have for information.
Okay, so we will have
Yeah.
quarterly
Yeah.
updates.
Yep. Yes, you will.
So we are not saying we're adopting the plan, but we are coming back to the plan, referring to the plan.
We will make sure that you have a quarterly update and of the information, and we'll try to start pulling together. So some of that, when it's city related, we can pull it together easy enough.
Mhm.
And like I said, we're hopeful that we will snag a homeless response manager here. I know.
I'll take any ray of sunshine.
In the near future. So we'll start moving that way.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank
You're welcome.
Great information. Okay.
No, sit.
I know.
I'll make mine quick.
Oh, okay, so it's not-
Yes, first, I apologize, this came to me a little late, so it wasn't included on the agenda. But the nominations for Maine Municipal Association's Executive Committee are now available. The deadline is Monday, April 22nd. Just a little bit of background, this is the executive committee that basically guides MMA. It's a 9-member board. And the commitment is 10 to 12 meetings a year. And there is an interview process, in terms of like, if, let's say you as a council decided that you wanted to nominate one of yourselves or whoever, to the committee, there's a process that they would have to go through, and then of course be voted on ultimately by all the member communities. So, I can send you this information. We could also put it probably on a future, council workshop if, you all want time to consider, unless you already know, or somebody wants to volunteer to be someone that sits on this. But I can certainly send out more information and we can circle up before the deadline.
I think that sounds better.
Yeah,
I think people should consider, I mean, MMA has no representation of any of the larger municipalities, nobody from Lewiston, Bangor, Portland, Waterville. It's all the smaller municipalities, so I think it would be very helpful for them to have somebody from a Bangor or someplace. This council Dubé was on the board and then she passed away. I filled out her term on the MMA committee, but it'd be great if somebody from Bangor.
Just to be clear, for eligibility, it would need to be a city manager or chief administrative official, a municipal officer, so one of you in order to actually sit on the committee.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a voice on this committee. I also feel whoever is gonna choose to be on this committee, it's dedication of time, and we need this. We need to know what's going on there and to advocate for our city. So it takes some more dedication.
Yes. Yeah, we will circle up on that and I'll send you more information too for you all to read through.
Sounds good.
Also very quickly, it was mentioned, but we have kicked off our website redesign. It is a lengthy process. We just kind of worked out the timeline for that. It's still many months down the road, but just a heads up that what comes with that is actually a replacement of our mass notification system and also our reporting system for problems. Right now, it's all kind of part of the same package. It's outdated. It's a little clunky. And so those pieces, we'll be able to update before the website itself. And so we will be going through like public outreach efforts and things of that nature and alerting. Basically, for example, right now, we have a mismatch of people over time that have signed up for certain alerts, and we get kickbacks and things of that nature. So just looking to move through that process with a clean slate, sending out notification to everyone, hey, we've moved systems. If you're still interested, go here to sign up, sort of a thing. So it's all positive stuff, but don't be surprised if you see stuff come out on social media and stuff, letting people know about the changes. So that's really positive stuff. It's been a long time coming. Our website is a little bit of a dinosaur. The last one I wanted to mention, electrification for Community Connector. So, we did receive a handful of new buses. However, the state, is really kind of pushing electrification for transit systems. I may have mentioned before that they actually paid for a third-party consultant named Hatch to come in and do, an electrification plan for the Community Connector. It is obviously very expensive in order to turn your buses to electric. However, two things. One, we are going out soon for architectural and design plans for the cold bus barn, which would include the infrastructure for charging, so that down the road, we have the capacity to charge any electric buses that we may bring on. We're also aware that like some of our longer routes, for example, may need like a hybrid version simply because of the length of time that it would be needed in order to ensure that it can get out and back. And then also the state last year had applied for a grant that included an electric bus and electric vans, to which we provided our support for that, and they did not award it. They're going after it again this year. And again, we have signed on to be supportive of that as well. So we are moving in that direction, or trying to. Our infrastructure is obviously aged. A lot of improvements are needed and you can't kind of bite everything off at once. But needless to say, it's all part of the plan.
I said, isn't our paratransit van hybrid?
Yeah, I think I think one maybe, but I'll be honest, is because the ADA paratransit kind of ballooned quickly and the pandemic pressures around vehicles, we were grabbing, vehicles that met our need regardless of whether or not, they were hybrid or electric. But that is, always our goal, and the leafs that we got for, service vehicles to move like bus drivers around, those are, hybrid, I believe. I know they charge,
And then my
so.
only other one is when you get the notifications, I think there should be one just for trash. But it's a trash
Yes.
holiday, it's not a trash holiday.
Yes, so actually, that's a very valid, point. There will be what I'll call touch points throughout this process where I'll be going to different stakeholders. I'm soliciting feedback for what they would like to see, and also on the back end, kind of pulling reports to figure out like what are we actually getting, all these notifications for and things of that nature. So, right now, if you've ever reported, through our system, it's kind of great because it's very comprehensive, but it's also, citizens don't always know like which category to choose when they're reporting a problem. So we kind of want to streamline that a bit for citizens. But still make sure it gets where it needs to go on our side so we can take care of things. So, a lot of positive changes coming our way though.
I told you when it was suggested, the electrical buses, I was like, impossible, we are getting new buses, so how? it
We
will
just
never
got the
happen.
last two buses, the last two brand new buses. And so we, as part of our capital plan, which I'm sure Debbie will be going through with you all for the budget processes, we know looking out that, all of I think our oldest buses are 2-ish years, I think, away, 2 or 3 years away from being replaced. And, if we're doing it correctly, it's gonna be in pieces.
Yeah.
But first, the coal bus barn really needs to be outfitted because what we learned with Hatch was there's lots of different ways you can go about it. Some communities have, brief charging stations at certain bus stops that do it quickly. But that's like more infrastructure build out. Others, they charge them all at night and then have backup buses so you can rotate buses through once they're charged. That's probably the place that we'll start. So it is pretty interesting, and I will just admit too, that by not jumping immediately into this, we have seen other transportation systems kind of work out some kinks, if you will, perhaps with some of these electric buses and the infrastructure. So, I think that we'll be pretty well positioned when we're at that point to kind of understand what we're getting into and what best practice is.
Perfect, that's what we're gonna get there.
I really hope so.
Awesome, thank you so much. Courtney.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I have.
I think that's it, we're adjourned, that's
Great.
good enough.
Yes, thank you.